a sudden, if that person wants to do something, that person has to make darn sure that they stay out of a nursing home for 5 years. And the most common situation I see is we're down to one single adult.
Someone has passed.
And that person is in danger of going to a nursing home. Well, if you do anything or try to do anything with a transfer and you pick up a 5-year disqualification period at that time, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to protect it.
Roger, I'm kind of familiar with these things, but I'm not quite clear as to what you just said. Is there greater protection offered to the joint owners of the house then at some point? If you make that decision while you're both alive and well, there's
greater protection because you're getting the clock ticking on both of them. And yeah, there's greater protection because as a spousal couple is allowed to keep $111,000. They can actually convert extra assets into income if needed. That's through an annuity. Time for another
Sure,
another
I
place.
think it's complicated. I understand.
All right. But you're getting the clock ticking for both of them. Okay. If one of them doesn't make the 5 years, you can always put the house back into the name of the one who's not going into the nursing home.
I see.
And then you could still try to qualify the person who is going to the nursing home for state assistance, Medicaid assistance.
I get you.
If you're down to one person, then it's just a question of, are they going to make the 5 years or not?
I see. It's almost like a gamble. We have 2 chips in the play as opposed to 1 chip in play. And so
well, you get the double clock ticking instead of the single clock ticking.
I understand.
Which has no margin for error, really.
I see. Okay. That makes some degree of sense. Now, the 5-year look back, how does that exactly work, Roger? If you do end up going into a nursing home, what happens is then the state has the right to pull at the value of the house. Is that how it works? In order to, if you have no choice, if you have to go into this nursing home, then the
well,
state...
I mean, basically, once again, if you have to go to a nursing home, the state doesn't come and take your house, take your money. They just say they're not going to pay for your care unless you financially qualify. Okay, and to financially qualify, I think we gave the guidelines as a spousal couple. Single individuals only allowed to have $2,000. Mm-hmm. Okay, so say you're applying for state assistance. It's an application process. You apply to Mass Health, which is the agency that handles it.
Who does that for you, Roger? This is the piece where it gets very. Does an attorney apply for you? How do you do that?
If you want to do it well and you have a complicated situation, an attorney who knows what he or she is doing should do it for you. Mm-hmm. I get in trouble, so I watch what I say. That's the right way to do it.
Okay.
And somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who's dealt with the people down at Mass Health, know what they're looking for.
Sure.
That's probably the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing to say. It's just like doing your own taxes. There's nothing to say you can't do the application yourself.
Right.
Sometimes COAs have people down there that help people. That may work out. It may not work out.
Sure.
And I love COAs. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But
what is a COA?
Oh, sorry, Council on Aging.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. Okay.
So. There's nothing that says you can't do it yourself. I think you're well advised to seek the assistance of somebody who knows what they're doing, and that generally is an elder law attorney.
I see. Okay, I see. Now, is this true or untrue, Roger? Because I also heard from attorneys, and I've been down this road a little bit, and I've heard conflicting reports on this, that nursing homes are more willing to take you if you have assets, or at least some assets, because then you pay for the first few months yourself, which they like, and then once you start to qualify for nursing home care through Medicaid, they'll start paying for it that way. But to get in initially, it's good to have, say, a couple, like $20,000 or $30,000 of assets. And then I heard the opposite. I heard the opposite is nursing homes don't like taking people with assets because they're afraid that that once they accept the person, they're not going to pay. So they rather see you down to Medicaid, because Medicaid is sort of a guaranteed way of making sure that they're going to be paid. How does it really work?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a yes or no. I think in general it may be a little bit easier to get in as a non-Medicaid person, but in terms of paying, if you're within striking distance, I don't think it needs to be more than a month. Mm-hmm. And basically, if a nursing home knows that you're applying for Mass Health and what your situation is, or if you're working with an attorney, I mean,
sure.
A lot of times I'll be doing that. They'll call me, hey, this family is telling me they're doing X with you. Is that right? So yeah. Mm-hmm. As long as they know that it's being worked on by somebody who knows what they're doing, they say, okay, well, they'll probably qualify the person. And so I can't say it's a set formula. I don't say, oh, we're only going to take you if you're Medicaid qualified, or we only, want to take you if we know that you have 10 months or something like that. Mm. So I don't think there's a set pattern on that. I don't
Yeah.
think it's strong one way or another.
It's a difficult process, I know, because I took care of a mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's, and
Okay.
she got to the point where she needed diapering. It got very difficult to care for her at home, and she was taken care of through daycare when we
Yeah,
went to
yeah.
work. But during the process of all this, a physical therapist came in, and it was really time for her to be in a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
But it was hard to move her into one. And the person who took care of her, she had like a knee issue as well, said, you know, unless something happens to them that's very dramatic, you really can't get them in. In this particular case, she took a fall while she was in daycare, and then she was paid for, just like the same process, paid for the first month,
Right.
because they thought they kind of even though they know they sort of,
Rehabilitated.
even though they know they
Right.
Medicaid will pay for that first month, and then they turn into a Medicare patient if the assets are gone, and that's how it works out. But as far as just getting someone who's at that point where they need diaper changing, really the family needs to let them go and go into a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
Is that difficult, as the person who spoke to me about the rehabilitation person said? Is it really hard to get a person into a nursing home once they're at that point? Is it to the point where they need to have a dramatic incident, a hospitalization, in order to get
Are
in?
you saying because the person would be unwilling to go?
No, I'm just saying that that it's hard to get in. They usually have to
No.
get in there via a hospital emergency. That's what I'm hearing, Roger. I don't know if that's true.
Well,
or
I mean,
untrue.
there's one way of going in is Medicaid is attached to. You need to have a 3-day stay at a hospital in order to get like the first 20 days covered. But no, somebody can go in directly if they can't be cared for in the community anymore.
Okay, I see.
You know, if a person is a danger to himself or others
Sure,
because they're out in the
absolutely.
community, then
Absolutely.
then they have to be there. So
Sure.
whether they go via hospital or they go directly from the house, it's whatever the situation calls for.
So as far as getting back to the simpler points, then, as far as protecting the home, we can do that in what ways? Do we have a trust? Is that one way
Well,
to do
the
it?
two best vehicles for the protection of the house are an irrevocable trust and a life estate. In fact, they're the only two vehicles that work for Medicaid
And
protection.
each has a 5-year look back.
Each involves a 5-year disqualification look back period.
So your best bet, if you're married, getting older, is to do one of those two plans,
Yeah.
depending upon which one works best for your particular situation.
Yeah.
If you're widowed or widower, is it still a different set?
No, it's those two as well. Your situation is a little more precarious because you have to be sure. I mean, a very common scenario that we see is a single individual who's in danger of, single because they're widowed, divorced, never married, and they're in immediate danger going in and they have a house. It's very tough to save the house.
Right,
You
it
try
is.
to transfer the house or do something with the house, there's a 5-year disqualification period. If that's the only asset or there are limited other assets, basically what we've had to do a lot of times is you have to sign an agreement with Mass Health saying we have no other liquid assets, so we sign an agreement that says we agree to put our house on the market except the first offer. Within 9 months, you're supposed to sell the house.
Wow,
So
wow. And in an
you don't
economy
want
like
that to
this,
happen.
that can be very difficult as well, correct?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's happened. It happens a lot.
And that's just because we're not planning as well as we should. Are people better than they used to be, Roger, or are they still not really planning?
I statistically, I can't say. I mean, obviously, I've got a fair amount of people come to me, so some people do it, but what percentage of the population it is, I have no idea.
What do you see mostly? Do you see people planning ahead in that before the 5 years, or do you deal generally with a kind of emergency situation?
Actually, both. Hopefully, and probably more people do deal ahead of time, but I see plenty of situations where there's an emergency situation. And it's something I say, my father, my mother just never wanted, they didn't want to face it, they didn't want to deal with it, they,
And sometimes, Roger, my experience has been that I know people go into nursing homes unexpectedly. They're great health, and then suddenly they're in a nursing home. But some people kind of have nursing home written all over them. My mother-in-law was one of those. She had nursing home written all over her. Some people have diseases, degenerative diseases, Parkinson's, MS. There are a lot of things that people can sort of see that maybe they need to especially be careful because they may have a certain vulnerability that could put them in a nursing home. Do you see people planning if they a sense of vulnerability, or people still kind of unwilling to make these choices no matter what their circumstances?
Once again, at the risk of being wishy-washy, I don't see a set pattern. I mean, some people are resolute. What I see is that if people have experienced that they had somebody go through it, they saw what a disaster was, they had an aunt or a father that lost a house, or if people, to me, that's it. If they've had a triggering event, if they dealt with it themselves, such
Sure,
as you.
right, right.
A lot of times, that's what'll make somebody come in and say, geez, we just had this, my father lost the house, he didn't have to, and now my aunt's in the same